Stories. Today we're talking to Tara Glastonbury, who at the moment is stuck in Melbourne, unable to leave due to the coronavirus, but she usually splits her time between Sydney and Melbourne, so she's a very busy lady. And she recently won one of the major prizes at QuiltCon. Welcome, Tara.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Today we're going to talk about your quilt called Handloomed. So here is the quilt, and when I first saw the quilt, I sort of went, oh yeah, that's interesting, but I couldn't see why it was so technical. And then I looked closer and I was just like, oh my God, look at all those joins. They're perfect. You're a very clever lady. So we're going to move straight into the first slide, which is your inspiration.
I guess with this quilt, I'd been following a woman called Liz Dawes, who owns Woven Stories Textiles in Western Australia. And I'd been following along her Instagram feed. And these are some of the pictures she took on one of her buying trips to India, and she's quite a good storyteller, so it's interesting watching her feed as well and hearing the stories. But she was talking about her travels and the textile makers and the people she meets over there. And this picture in particular, she was mentioning that because weaving's traditionally a male domain, and she was mentioning that lots of young women are being brought on to learn to weave now because 2/3 of the weavers have had to leave the area to find work in, other types of work. And one of the, I guess, guys who runs one of the cooperatives was talking about how khadi is the everyday cloth. And I don't know whether it's because people are wanting to start to wear Western clothing or whatever it is, but the sales for the khadi are going down a lot and there's not as much call for them. And so the guy was mentioning that he really needed to find other markets for his khadi cloth. And for me, I guess as someone who doesn't have, any strong ties to place or a strong tradition that I come from, textiles with a history really speak to me. And particularly ones where you can see the hand of the maker in the cloth. So I ended up getting in touch with Liz and asking if she was interested in doing a collaboration. And that's where it all started, really.
They're beautiful photos.
Yeah, they're lovely, aren't they?
Yes, I love seeing little collections like this en masse, and that just really appeals. Here we've got the men doing it. It's obviously very warm there.
Yes.
I know in my travels I've seen weaving areas and they're usually just stuck in little rooms and the machines take up most of the rooms and they just sit there all day. So
these are all different types of looms and not necessarily weaving the khadi, but some examples of pit looms, and as the one we saw stretched halfway down the street before as well. Lots of interesting but very traditional ways of making cloth. So I guess this is a good slide to be on next, because the process from here was I tend to work between handwork and the computer quite a lot. So sometimes I'll start with sketching, sometimes an idea will come, I'll start on the computer. In this instance, in Melbourne, I'm quite close to the RMIT textile campus. So they've got a really good textile library there, and I spent quite a bit of time in there looking at traditional Indian textiles. And then I remembered I'd been to an exhibition at the RMIT gallery down here where they must have invited some Indian designers over to exhibit. And I just remember being blown away by the, vibrant colours and amazing stuff they were coming up with. And I kind of thought, well, I don't really want to take a tradition that's not mine and turn it into a quilt, but I really wanted to reflect where the fabric was coming or where it had come from. So the whole idea of weaving, and this is me starting to sketch out ideas on the computer. And what I did from there was probably came up with, I think, 3 or 4 sketch ideas like this. And then I sent them over to Liz and I kind of explained my background or gave her a brief of where each idea had come from. And I think this one, although it didn't quite end up like this, it went through a few more stages from here, it was probably the one that I thought was most appealing, and Liz agreed. So that's where we went. So basically Liz supplied the textiles and I did the design, and
it's really interesting. There's sort of a transparency happening.
Yes, so it's using that. I think the vertical tends to be like a mid-range and a lighter value fabric, and then because the horizontal is a dark and a mid, it does tend to give that look of what you would get actually if you were using that different warp and different weft color when you're weaving.
Yeah, I really like that. It looks like you popped over to Western Australia.
I think it just got to a point because we started, backwards and forwards with colors, and it just all got too hard. So I just went, I'm getting on the plane and coming over. And I'm really glad I did, because it was just, I guess, not only seeing the full range of possibilities by doing that. So it was definitely worth it.
Definitely. And for those of you that aren't familiar with Australian geography, it's no mean feat to jump on a plane when we had planes to jump onto.
So basically that's the kind of cardi range. And I did toy with the idea of putting stripes in as well for a while. As you can imagine, I got a bit like a kid in a candy shop with all the fabrics. But yeah, so I basically spent the weekend testing out colorways and I guess hatching other ideas for other quilts in the future and things like that as well. But it was definitely a good thing to do.
So you stuck with the solids though?
Yeah, in the end, yes.
Very tactile, aren't they?
Oh yeah, they're just, I mean, there's definitely parts of they're a little bit narrower than kind of what we would call like a standard fabric width.
Mm-hmm.
And there's definitely areas where I guess if you were looking at selling them as standard quilting cotton, sometimes there's the odd nub or flaw or things like that in them. But I just think it really adds to the beauty of the overall effect, really.
Is it a very open weave?
It's a little bit like working with, a shot cotton or something like that. It's not, so it is finer than working with quilting weight fabric, but it's not too difficult.
It's not too wobbly.
Well, so in this, the top one in this pick was, I did up a test dummy of the cushion version before I went. So what we decided to do was that I would make up a cushion as the kind of preview, and then we would leave the bigger quilt to the second show. And so I took over a kind of mock-up version of the quilt that I'd made, of the cushion that I'd made, to see how it would go. And then this is me coming back with, and I still thought I was going to use a stripe at that point. So this was me dumbing, or, getting through a cushion to send over to the first show. I did starch the fabric. So when you're asking about how floppy it is, I definitely starched everything.
When I was looking at them and that sort of weave, I thought, oh, that'd be really tricky. You'd really have to make sure that you were cutting really straight of grain. And it's just,
I think I don't tend to worry about that kind of stuff. I put this picking because, as I was saying before, the width isn't a normal width. So it was a little bit guesswork at first to figure out measurements and things like that. But this is all I had left over from the cushion, and I made the front, the back, and the binding. And so we got the measurements pretty right on that one.
Yeah, you certainly did.
That's the cushion.
It's a really interesting colour combination as well.
Obviously there's quite a range of colours, but it's not like working with a colour card with 350 colours on it or something like that you get to choose. And it also is a little bit dependent on what arrives in the box or things like that as well. So, right. But yeah, I kind of like that challenge. I like being given limitations to work within, so that I just think it makes you a bit more creative sometimes.
Definitely. No, I like that combination. Looks great against the blue sofa as well. So is this your final colour selection?
It was, and it was a bit different to, so when I was over there, we probably came up with a short list of, 5 maybe options, and the cushion was definitely one of them. And then neither Liz or I could make up our minds, so I ended up putting on Instagram about what people's favourites were, and this was close to it, but we ended up having to swap out some of the colours anyway because of what had arrived in the box and all sorts of things. But I'm actually really glad with what we ended up with. So
very active Instagrammer.
Pretty active. I don't know. I'm hopeless at writing notes for my process, so I often find that to remember things or remember where I'm up to, I just take photos anyway. So it's kind of an extension of process for me. And I'll often find that I'm going back to favourite pics, not on Instagram, but just favourite pics in my photo feed as reference points for myself. So it's actually just part of my process, really.
Started the process here with the strips.
I've started the process here.
How wide were the strips?
From memory, about 2 inches, maybe a little bit wider. Yeah, so basically, no matter whether it's the kind of cushion or the queen size or the throw, this one's done in columns and it's done in strip sets and then cross cut. So I think that's why I was able to get things quite accurate, because basically you're just sewing sets of strips together and then you're cross cutting them to join back together. The first set is the kind of mid and light colours, and then this is the dark and mid that forms the horizontal borders. So yeah, here you can basically see the sets. There's a really long set at the top and bottom, and then that's where they've all started to be, that dark bit in the middle, it just gets strips cut off the top, and the long ones get strips cut off the bottom, and then you just mix and match them till they join together like that, basically.
And that's your design floor.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't really have a spare wall, so because there's art and stuff hung all over them, so it's the floor.
I actually have a design wall, which is what you can see behind me, but there's usually quilts pinned to it, because my machines are in the way. So
yes.
This was the finished top, all scrunched up.
Yep, that's the finished top. I guess the thing I don't really have, I think having a design background, I don't have usually any troubles with colours and putting things together as far as the top is concerned, but adding the quilting layer is a challenge for me all the time. I am getting better at mocking it up on the computer first, because otherwise I tend to find I'm in a world of unpicking, and that's nobody's idea of fun.
It seems to be a common thread
in
the chats that I'm having with
is it?
quilters. Oh yes, sometimes it's a really good time for thinking about the quilt, or just thinking about life in general. But no, you're not alone. You said you had a design background.
Yeah, so I started as a graphic designer and stub editor, and that's where I started my working life. And then I've spent kind of the last probably 20 years managing creative studios. So yeah, a lot of art direction and working with design programs and things like that. So that has stood me in good stead as far as my quilting's concerned. But yeah, that extra layer of quilting just kind of something I need to work on, I think.
Oh, I don't know. It looks pretty good to me.
So that probably lived like that on the floor for quite some time before this happened.
That's quite common, actually. Many people will cogitate over their quilts for quite a while before they work out how to quilt it. And some, like me, just start and then hope that it works out in the end. But this was very well thought out, very even stitching, nice straight lines. Is this on a domestic machine or a mid-arm or a long arm?
No, just on my domestic. I don't think I'm going to be a long armour. Yeah, it's just on the domestic.
Walking foot?
Yep. So yeah, I haven't ventured into free motion. I tend to be quite geometric with my quilting, with my quilt designs anyway. So the walking foot suits it. Maybe one day I'll get into free motion, but not for now.
Not for now. Oh, I think this quilt definitely sort of called out for straight quilting.
I agree.
And so here it is, hanging in the breeze.
That's hanging in the breeze. I've got quite a few good laneways up behind me here, so I just tend to take the quilt and pin them on random people's shed doors.
Oh, right. In fact, you've got a lovely shadow on your face from your window now.
I know. I'll go and...
No, that's fine. It's fine. It's just it matches your quilt, stripy.
It's because this fabulous changing Melbourne weather where it is really dark and grey, and then 2 minutes later the sun comes out. So the quilt has had a bit of some posting around the countryside, because it then had to get over to Liz to be in the quilt show over in Perth.
Yep.
And then, of course, about here, actually, QuiltCon announced they do a fabric challenge every year, and they do a design challenge every year. And the design challenge was announced as stripes. And I was just like, well, this quilt is being entered in stripes. Yeah, so I took all the photos before sending it to Liz, and then she had to send it back to me so that I could then send it off to QuiltCon after they told me that it had got in. You
were actually over there in QuiltCon?
So yeah, this was a bit funny, because normally they send you an email to tell you if you've won. And I don't know, I think I just started a new work contract. Things were all over the place. I was backwards and forwards between Melbourne and Sydney, and for some reason I didn't see the email. So, and I also only went to QuiltCon at the last minute as well. So I think I landed at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The awards ceremony started at 5. We got into the hotel at 5. I had a shower. I was, completely oblivious at this point. Went over there, plonked myself right in the middle of the crowd because I knew a couple of people who were winning so that I could cheer my friends on. And then I'd just been filming people so that I could show them, them getting up on stage. And suddenly I hear the word Cardi, and I looked up on the screen. I was like, what? So yeah, I'm having to crawl over everybody to get out and get my award. So yeah, it was pretty funny, but it was actually a really nice way to find out, because I get so nervous with those kinds of things. So it was very nice just to not even have to worry about being nervous and just turn up, basically.
That's very funny. I can just imagine your face as the penny dropped, as her waiting for you to come up.
No, so this is Mary Fons, and she does a talk every year taking people around QuiltCon, and it's on at like 8:30 in the morning, and I'm usually really jet lagged and can't manage to do that kind of thing. But a couple of people I know went on it, and the last quilt she stopped at on her walk around the show was this, and she had a big talk about my quilt, so I was very chuffed, and a couple of people sent me the video. So yeah, that was a pretty proud moment.
I bet. What a thrill to win. Yeah. And it won first prize in the Stripes Challenge.
Yes, it did.
I believe QuiltCon's going virtual next year because of COVID.
I think I'll be doing a bit of staying awake at all hours so I can participate, but it looks like they've kind of thought about that kind of thing, and some of them are, a lot of the classes aren't live so that everybody can participate no matter where in the world they are. So it'll be good to see how it goes.
I think everything's changing at the moment.
Totally.
We don't know what the future's going to bring, but yep, everybody seems to be adapting, which is very interesting. We live in interesting times.
Oh yes, we do.
Here is the quilt. Any tips for your exact matching your seams? I think you're obviously a master at it.
I tend to press open, seams open, and I know that everybody's into pressing different sides and nesting and all that hoo-ha, and I press all my seams open. And honestly, I used to have a little, what I called the putt-putt sewing machine, and I could never match a single seam with that. And I did upgrade my machine, and sometimes it's the tools as well. So I think for this one, it's the fact that I did starch it, the fact that I strip set it so that it's not having to worry about, as long as you get the seam accurate, by the time you're cross-cutting, it's fine.
What machine do you have?
I have a Bernina Quilters Edition 770.
That's what I have.
Oh, there you go.
Well done. It is a great machine.
Yeah, compared to my last little one.
So what are you working on at the moment?
A quilt that I'm submitting to a magazine. I've got so I'm a part of a textile group called Tenfold in Melbourne, and we have an exhibition at the end of this year. So I'm starting to work on my pieces for that. I've put in for Sydney Craft Week as well for a piece to be shown as part of that too. So I'm starting to think about putting bits of that together as well.
Great. So you're not just resting on your laurels, you're planning. Have you got something in line for QuiltCon 2021?
I don't tend to make my quilts for QuiltCon. It's more that I get to the end of the year, do a bit of assessment and go, will anything suit? Is there something appropriate here? I mean, I really like entering it. So, my style is modern. So hopefully by the time I get to November, there will be something that I think is worth entering.
I hope you've enjoyed today's quilt story. And if you have, please consider subscribing, the buttons down below, and like the video, and then I'll be inspired to make lots more. And I want to thank you so much, Tara, for joining me today. And I look forward to seeing what you come up with in the future.
Well, thank you. I've really enjoyed it.
Great. Bye for now.
See ya.